Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up in just a few minutes in our Millennial Mom segment, brought to us by OGPay.com, we are featuring the incredible Stephanie Arnold, global thought leader, Emmy-nominated TV producer, international best-selling author, speaker, podcast host, and Netflix's very own sleeper star. That's a lot of accomplishments. Today, we're chatting about her book, 37 Seconds, Near-Death Experiences, and the Power of Intuition. Now, near-death experiences, or NDEs, are triggered during singular life-threatening episodes when the body is injured by blunt trauma, a heart attack, asphyxia, shock, and so on. You get the picture. About 1 in 10 patients with cardiac arrest in a hospital setting undergoes such an episode. Thousands of survivors of these harrowing touch and go situations tell of leaving their damaged bodies behind and encountering a realm beyond everyday existence, unconstrained by the usual boundaries of space and time. And these powerful, mystical experiences can lead to permanent transformations of their lives. Now, when Stephanie was pregnant with her second child, she had a sudden and overwhelming premonition that she would die during the delivery. Though she tried to tell the medical team and her family, no one gave her warning credence. Finding no physical indications that anything was really wrong, they attribute everything to hormones and anxiety. Except one member of the medical team did take her concerns seriously enough and made the fateful decision to order extra units of blood just in case. Then, during the delivery, Stephanie suffered a rare amniotic fluid embolism. She went into cardiac arrest and flatlined for 37 seconds. She died. Using the supplementary blood, the medical team did revive her, and she remained unconscious for more than 6 days. And here to chat 37 seconds, dying revealed heaven's help, a mother's journey, is the amazing Stephanie Arnold. Welcome to the show, beautiful soul.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. That was awesome.
Yeah, listen, you are awesome. Please walk me through what transpired and how you basically predicted your own death.
Yeah, as you said, I was a TV producer, so I'm pretty good under pressure, live TV and what have you. So I'm not a histrionic, neurotic person before your audience thinks, oh, she must have been crazy. But so during this pregnancy, this is my second child. So it's a second pregnancy, second childbirth. This wasn't the fear of the unknown, but at the 20-week ultrasound, I was diagnosed with something called a placenta previa, which is a 1 in 200 risk where the placenta is growing on top of the cervix. And worst case scenario is like as the belly grows, as the uterus grows, if it, it should move out of the way. But if it doesn't, you could have a C-section. But there was something in that moment that sat wrong. And I call it a knowing. You don't know how you just do. And I think we've all had these kind of experiences. Like I don't have science behind it, but I just know something bad is about to happen. And so I told my husband, who's a PhD economist from University of Chicago, former Air Force pilot, like very linear in his thinking, data-driven. He's like, honey, I said, I don't know what's wrong, but something really bad is about to happen. And he's like, you need to be calm. We don't have all the information, but you're getting great prenatal care. And, I think you need to relax. And so, what does one do, especially if you're kind of type A personality? You start being Dr. Google. And so I start Googling everything, placenta previa, what happens? And it says placenta previa can turn into an accreta, which is what Kim Kardashian had. It says, if it happens, then you can bleed. If that happens, you can hemorrhage. If that happens, you might need a hysterectomy. If that happens, you and the baby could lose your life. And I sat back and I said to my husband, I said, this is going to happen to us. The only difference is the baby's going to be fine, but I'll be dead on the operating table. And of course, my husband is trying to keep me calm, and he's like, relax, it's not going to happen. All the tests are negative for what I'm fearing would happen. I sought out specialists. I went to the head of gynecological oncology at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, a top teaching hospital in the country. And they're like, Mrs. Arnold, why are you here? I'm like, well, I'm going to need a hysterectomy when I give birth. You're going to give it to me. So I need you to be prepared. And he's like, have you been on the internet? And I was like, well, yes, I have, but this is going to happen. And so you have to see like these doctors are taking notes and then stopping and saying, okay, she's crazy, and so they're like, look, why don't we get an MRI? If the MRI shows it's positive for an accreta, then, I'll schedule myself during your C-section. And of course, the MRI is negative for an accreta. And they're like, okay, you should be fine. My husband's like, you should be fine. And I'm like, but I'm not. And so then I took to Facebook. I posted, if anybody needs my blood type. I said, I wrote goodbye letters. I sent goodbye letters. This woman stopped me on Starbucks and she was pregnant. She's like, oh, how's the pregnancy going? I'm like, I'm going to die.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, every single person I saw was like scared of me, scared for me, and just stayed away from me. And so ultimately, at the 36-week mark, which I was supposed to deliver in 37 weeks, 36-week mark, my husband was out of town. And that's the day I started bleeding and had to go into the hospital. So I grabbed my daughter, who was 2 at the time. And we get to the hospital, they triage me, and I'm Skype chatting with my husband on the plane as he's heading back from New York. And I'm telling him, you've made me the happiest woman in the world. Please take care of this children. You know, this is not his fault, the baby's fault. I'm like, you know, and he's still not getting it. So he's like, where do I meet you? I said, 8th floor, hopefully, you know. And so that was the end of that conversation. And then I look at my daughter and I kiss her a million times. I'm confident that this is the last time I'm going to see her. And then as they wheel me down in the gurney on the way to the OR, my doctor, who's a friend, she's like, Stephanie, I know you're nervous. You know, Jonathan's not here. We're going to take care of you. We just, you know, the ORs are quiet. You've been stressed this whole pregnancy. And I said, there's something wrong. You need to put me under general anesthesia. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. If I do that, I put the baby to sleep. And that's it. I mean, this is my last ditch effort. So I'm being wheeled into the room that's going to give life to my son and ultimately take mine.
Wow.
The fear was so palpable. It's like, if you're, you know, I am seeing, you know, everybody's seeing an open road and all I see is an 18-wheeler headed straight for me and no one can see it. So the panic is there. I'm having a C-section. So they put a curtain in front of my face and they deliver a healthy and happy baby. And seconds later, I'm dead.
Now, when you experienced this, when you died and you felt you left your body, tell me what you experienced. Did you see everything unfold in front of your eyes? And did you come back with more intuition?
Yeah, so it's interesting to say. So, you know, after my recovery, physically, I was getting better. I had kidney failure, a heart attack. Like you said, I had an amniotic fluid embolism, a very rare pregnancy complication. And so no one could give me answers how I saw everything 3 months ahead of time, because everything happened the way I said it was. I hemorrhaged. I needed a hysterectomy. The doctor was called in afterwards. You know, the uterus and the placenta had merged, but the MRI didn't pick it up at the time that was it. So everything happened exactly the way I saw it. And the
baby was fine though throughout all of it.
Baby was perfectly fine. He was delivered prior to this happening. And the doctors were like, how did you know? And I was like, I'm in a teaching hospital. You should tell me. And they're like, well, foreboding exists prior to an embolus or a heart attack, but 3 months before in the details you had it. So it set me on this journey. And I didn't recall anything about a near-death experience until afterwards. I had been given a lot of drugs. And, you know, everybody was like, did you see the light? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, they gave me a lot of meds, and I was totally traumatized. So ultimately I saw a regression therapist who regression therapy uses hypnotherapy to take you back into those moments of trauma. And so hopefully you can go in as an observer of these things, and your brain stores these images as film strips in your head. And so under hypnosis, you can potentially access them. So I videotaped my therapy. And during the therapy sessions, when we finally got into the OR, I saw who hit the button for the code, which nurse jumped on my chest to give me CPR, what my doctor was doing, what my anesthesiologist was doing down by my feet, that my doctor kept saying, this can't be happening, this can't be happening. And you can see a replay of this. We're on a Netflix show called Surviving Death, and we're in episode 1 of it. And so you see my doctor's reaction after her hearing and seeing these tapes. And, you know, in a moment, like afterwards, I felt better because I saw hundreds of spirits. I saw people that I knew, people that I didn't know. And then in those moments, you know, after we were done, I was calmer. And so my husband was like, you know, how do you know this isn't a recalled episode of Grey's Anatomy in your head?
That's hilarious. But, I just want to interject right here because it's interestingly enough, a 2017 study by two researchers at the University of Virginia raised the question of whether the paradox of enhanced cognition occurring alongside compromised brain function during a near-death experience could be written off as a flight of imagination. And the researchers administered a questionnaire to 122 people who reported near-death experiences. They asked them to compare memories of their experiences with those of both real and imagined events from about the same time. And the results suggest that the near-death experiences were recalled with much greater vividness and detail than either real or imagined situations were. And in short, the NDEs were remembered as being realer than real. So obviously, there's a big difference there in the way that your memory plays things back.
It is. It is. And psychologists have said, of course, when you're having a near-death experience, you want your loved ones with you. And I said, that's fine. I'll put a pin in that one. But it's the point that I saw people I didn't know who had messages from people I do know. And I'm not a psychic, but all of these messages started downloads. And then they were verified later by people I know that I'm like, there's no way I would have known certain things. And I write that also in the book. So
in the book. And the one member of the medical team that did take your concerns seriously enough and made that fateful decision to order the extra units of blood just in case, do you remain in contact with that person?
I do. I taught at her hospital. I do continuing education at a lot of medical institutions. She's now the head of OB anesthesia at UPMC. And so she said to me, she didn't feel like it was intuitive. She just felt like, okay, in that moment, it wasn't anything that would taught her at Northwestern Medicine. She said she's always been spiritual. She thanks God before she walks into a patient's room, like there's a reason she's in their line of sight. And she leads her life intuitively, but she's an excellent doctor. And she ultimately flagged my file and incorporated extra blood in a crash cart in the operating room. And she was my last ditch effort with my consultations. I had like 10 different consultations with doctors and everything. And she said she was I explained my fears like I did to everybody. And she was the first doctor, unbeknownst to me, that said she was uncomfortable with, I'd had a baby before, I'd had a C-section before, had been so specific about what was going to happen and had sought out specialists to save my life. And with that one phone call, she's the one that flagged my file and incorporated all the measures to save
I love it. Divine intervention. Well, we're out of time, but I also want to add that near-death experiences, interestingly enough, came to the attention of the general public in the last quarter of the 20th century from the work of physicians and psychologists, Stephanie, but in particular, Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience in his 1975 bestseller, Life After Life, noticing patterns in what people would share about their near-death stories. These researchers turned a phenomenon once dismissed as feverish hallucination into a field of empirical studies. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. No, it was a pleasure. And you've done your research on near-death experiences. So it's been enlightening for all of us involved. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was our Millennial Mom segment brought to us by OGPay. I'm going to end with a special little prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Caldwell Soames Incorporated, investing globally in transformative businesses like Original Digital Corporation, or ODC. ODC develops advanced consumer and commercial fintech solutions such as OGPay, which will transform the way you manage your money. From sending and receiving money globally for free, paying for goods and services in person and online, pay bills, buy and sell digital currencies, all while earning interest. OGPay is easy to set up, FDIC insured, and your information is secured. Check out ogpay.com.